What's the real nugget you want to share with business owners?
Don't wing it. Be prepared. So again, get clarity around that role, get clarity around what success looks like, get really clear on who you want your interview team to be. So who are your decision makers, who are nice to have, and who are like the ancillary courtesy that we need to have them interview with.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by OneAccord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
Recording, live streaming. Great. Okay, welcome everyone again to another episode of The Value Factory presented by OneAccord. And we have a subject matter expert today that I'll be introducing in a moment. We're going to be talking about the trends that we're seeing in the market and AI as they relate to the hiring process. I mean, I hear all the time there's all these people looking for jobs, but hiring managers, employers are really having a hard time making a good fit. And making a good fit is in our guest's DNA. Kim Frost is a master at putting the right people in the right place in the right way. Right, right, right. Very cool. Her company is Frost Communications. She is
Hold
also,
on, sorry, Frost Connections.
okay, editor, did you hear that? Yeah, it says connections. I have all three forms of dyslexia. It's a
Yep,
scary
no,
world.
that's why we have editors.
You got it. Great. Her company, Frost Connections, she helps to find and place candidates in key positions in high performing companies. I also want to share that she is also a managing principal at OneAccord. And so we might talk about how that synergy works, but we are very excited to have her leadership because talent acquisition, I mean, you don't have a good team, you don't have a good company. So
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
Kim cares about the long-term health and happiness of the people she works with. And I've had enough time with her to know that she's very authentic. That's not just a byline. And so if I'm a business owner, Kim, listening today, why does hiring feel harder than ever, even when there's so many people out there looking for work?
Yes. Well, first off, thank you, Andrew, for having me. I'm excited
Welcome.
to be here and chat with you. Yes, it is a really interesting time right now. So, a lot of companies think that because this is an employer driven market, meaning there are more jobs than employees, it should be easy finding people. But you don't just want to find people, you want to find the right people. I've talked to a lot of clients right now that, to their credit, are a little hesitant on spending fees for third party recruiters. And so what they're doing right now is they're posting jobs and hoping the right candidate will show up. I always call that post and pray. Um,
Hope is not a strategy.
no, it is not. I wish it was because we would all have a very rich, robust life, right? But, here's the thing that stinks in a market like this is you could have thousands of applications and somebody has to go through those applications. Now, yes, you could have an AI tool that goes through those applications, but AI can't read between the lines. So really what employers need to do to find the right talent is get clarity around what they need. So what is exactly success looks like, and then you have to get buy-in from your team because I have worked with leaders on executive level positions, and every single leader had a vision of what this person should do.
And they're not always the same, are they?
Oftentimes they're not. So it's getting everybody in the room to really clarifying what they actually need and then why. So once you get crystal clear on that, it's easier to identify the right candidate, and it's not just again through posting.
Excellent. And I've been the CEO of a couple companies and have had to hire really high level C-suite folks. And I have always engaged a professional like you because it really is mission critical. And we were advised, and I just want your input to say, is this a fairly holistic approach? Is one, make sure that the hiring team, we did it in panels, we involved board of directors, be really clear on the roles and responsibilities and the skill sets But beyond that, there needs to be a good culture fit. Do they have the soft skills? Are they going to gel with our corporate culture? Is that a good start?
Absolutely. Andrew, you could do my job. It sounds like you
I
you
know
you
I
you've
couldn't.
been in recruiting for a while.
You've forgotten more than I've ever learned.
You're so
I
sweet.
hire professionals like you and it makes me look good. So
Yes, but
can't
but
do
you
it on my own.
understand it. But see, you have the foundation, right? You just said it. You have the clarity, you have the buy-in from your leadership team, you have the right interviewers on your panel, and you are very clear about what competencies that you're looking for. So I don't want to say insist, but my best practice is identify your interview team, bring them all together in one room to say, okay, here's what I'm looking for. One, is there any questions? Okay. No. And believe it or not, I've had clients that we have had interview teams, and the interview team will be like, wait, what are we hiring for and why? So identify the interview team, let them know what you need and why, and then assign a competency. Because as you mentioned, everybody wants to focus on a certain behavior trait that what's the word I want to say, that is collective of your culture, right? What that culture fit is. And that's also pretty vague because one is you don't want the interview team to ask the same questions, and you can't expect one person to uncover every single trait in one interview. And you don't want one person interviewing the candidate 5 and 6 times because, again, you want to eliminate some bias. So bring your interview team together, have buy-in, have alignment, ask questions, and assign competencies. And then we go one further is we will craft the questions for our team to answer. I've had another client that actually crafts their own questions, again, that aligns with their culture, their employee values.
Excellent. Excellent. And, another thought was, and I just really need your view of this. I know that in the past, and even some of our clients have used personality and communication style. I don't want to call it a test, but like DISC and some of the other
Mhm,
ones.
mhm.
And the question is that make sense? And the follow on to that is, do people know how to game that system so that they can come across as more attractive than they really are?
That's another really good question, Andrew. Again, you could do my job. So I would say 15 years ago, we would have these programs be only for executives. So I had a client that when we had a final candidate, VP partner level and above, they would go through a 2-day assessment. So part of it would be on site with the psychiatrist, and then they would do some work online. And what that tool was used for was really uncovering any areas, any weaknesses to help that leader manage that person. I love a tool for that. But I want to take it one step further because I did talk about this on my podcast. Plug here, higher power
What
is
a great name.
thank you. So I have a client that has rolled out this tool to the entire company. So they're a manufacturing firm. There's 700 people. You've got your leadership team to your floor workers on the same level, I like to say. And every single one of them has gone through this assessment. And that assessment was rolled out to help with how do you communicate best with this person, understanding what they need as far as communication tools, how we message it to that person, and then how do we help them grow? And are they in the right job? So that was a big lift. It took a dedicated person. So that means time and money. And you always have resistance, even when you're hiring externally and okay, we have this assessment. I was like, oh God, it's a personality test. They're going to uncover all my demons. That's not what it's for, right? This is really for how can we help manage you better and how can we help grow you so that you're happy and you're productive, because happiness and productiveness are, they're tied. There's no two ways about that. So I like those tools, but you have to be consistent. You have to dedicate the time, the money, the resource, and I would say have your entire company go through that as well as your new hires.
And that sounds like a process with a new hire that's kind of the trailhead of onboarding. This is after you found somebody that you want to hire and a good fit. Are there ever scenarios where this process exposed that maybe they chose the wrong person and they go uh, back to the recruiting part of it?
Yes. Again, another good question. So there are some tools. So there's no tools that are going to say, yes, you should hire this person or not. The tools that I'm seeing out that are coming out right now is tools that assess the job and then the characteristics needed for that job. And so what I have my clients have done is they've taken the job description and they look at this tool and they say, okay, mark off what's important for this. Is it initiative? Is it collaboration? Is it communication? So that assessment will come back and say, here are the characteristics that you need in this hire. And then when the candidate is interviewing, they take this assessment and then they'll get the results back. And the assessments aren't a big long, okay, tell me how many cubic tons of sand there are on the west coast of XYZ. They're very simple. They've done that. They're very simple questions like, okay, tell me of these 5 things, how do you typically, how do you, react in a situation like this? How do you do this? How do you do that? And it's from the multiple choice answers, none of them are geared, or there's not an obvious answer because again, we want to be very fair and take out any bias. So that would be ideal. There are some tools that will come back and say, based on what you need, based on your culture, here's an area, here's a gap. And then my clients will come back and say, is this an investable area that we can teach or train for that gap? So yes, I have seen companies not hire based off these assessments, but I think that's okay because you as an employee don't want to go into a company where it's not bringing out the best in your skill sets or something of your strength or what you want to do.
Right. It's not only needs to be a good fit for the employer, it needs to be a good fit for the team member. I remember in another life, and I'm going back to early 80s. So, I mean, it's scary how old I am. But I applied for a position at Ford Motor Company. And the hiring process, I mean, just, the testing you, whatever, to see if it was a good fit lasted almost all day. I was photographed. They gave me an IQ test. Can't believe I passed that. They did a personality test and I was interviewed by 6 different people.
Okay.
It was absolutely nuts. And I did make it through the cut and ended up being, a wonderful fit, but it was a little bit invasive and intimidating. Of course, at that time, I'm, my mid 20s and
Right.
I don't have all the intellect and charm that I have now.
And the
But
good looks. Let's not forget that.
yeah, we got to put
Well,
that in.
and
Oh,
Andrew,
this is
I absolutely adore you, but you did say it was in your 20s. So these assessments have evolved since then. Hopefully they're not invasive, but I'm okay if they're, an entire day because the company is showing you that they're really invested in hiring the right person. And you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing
right.
you.
I didn't know that at 25 years old, but I certainly
No.
in hindsight do.
And I think those assessments back in, a couple decades ago were very, I want to say psychological, right? Understand the kind of person that you are that may not necessarily be related to the job. But you said something and now that was really important and I forgot what I was going to say. So keep going. And if I think about it, I'll be like, oh,
Well, I'm
wait,
I'm kind of bouncing around on you, and I'm sorry, but
wow,
I know you work with leaders every day, and most of what you do, they're critical hires, or they're up the career ladder. So, what's the one hiring trend now in 2025 that you think business leaders cannot ignore? What's the 800-pound gorilla in the tent?
transparency.
Okay, expand on that a little bit.
You know what? I don't like comparing recruiting to dating, but when you go to an interview, you put your best foot forward. And when you're interviewing people, I'm hoping you're putting your best foot forward. But you never want to pretend to be something that you're not, both from an employer or employer standpoint. So, I will reference Nick from OneAccord. He is transparent. He's not afraid to open the kimono. Harvard Business Review just did an article on transparency, but balancing between being too transparent while being an effective leader. If a person is walking into a job that has some challenges, that maybe has a few landmines, call it out. Because if someone is not going to be up for the challenge, then they're not the right person.
Right.
So I have another client who I adore.
They've
Again,
got to
that
be coachable, right?
say what? So what? What?
They have to be coach. I mean, the new hire has to be coachable,
We all
especially
need to
if
be
you're
coached.
trying to bridge some experience or skill gaps.
Right. But how that ties into transparency, right? So I have another client, again, family owned business, 70 years old, 700 people. And the CEO is absolutely transparent. And after my candidates come back interviewing, first thing I'll say is, okay, what did you hear that scared you off? I literally will say that because, again, you want to make sure that you have the right person because no one wants to make a bad decision. You don't, as the employee or new potential hire, the employer does it. And I, as a third party search firm, don't want it to be a bad hire because we back all of our hires and we take our job very seriously because it's someone's livelihood in life. So I would say to all employers, besides having clarity on your role, be transparent because if someone's going to get scared away and you need somebody that needs to lean into it, then move on to the next.
Right. And over my career, I've had the opportunity to work with the good, the bad, and the ugly in your profession. And one of the things that impresses the heck, just impresses me so much about you is that you're not about transactions. It's like, okay, I got that interview. I checked that box. You're about relationships. And I know some of those relationships last for years and even decades. So I think that focus on relationship over transaction is what really puts you ahead of the curve.
Well, thank
And you're
you.
right. Nick is very transparent and, as you are, and it comes across as authentic. And I think that's an important attribute. So
Yes,
you
I
were
hope so.
saying,
And thank you for the compliment.
well, it's more than checking boxes. You're a rock star. So
Absolutely.
you said earlier before in this interview that companies don't have a hiring problem. They have a clarity problem. In fact, you just brought that up again. So I know we've touched on that, but can we do a deeper dive on explaining exactly what that means, especially in today's job market?
So if you think about I'm seeing this change a little, which is good because I've been doing this differently. If you think about the job descriptions and you go, here's the role, here's the responsibility, here are the qualifications. That tells you nothing about the job or the person. So one of the things that we do, and I'm giving away a little bit of our secret sauce, but again, transparency is I always ask my clients, what does success look like a year from now? So define it for me. What will they have accomplished? I'm taking those notes, and from that, I create the quote job description, which is really a performance profile, it's success profile, and it's that KPI. So when I give that document to candidates and the candidates that we work with, 80% of them, it used to be higher, but again, we're in an employer driven field. I'm sorry, in an employer driven world right now. The majority of the candidates that we work with are gainfully employed. So when I give them this document, they will come back and say, oh my God, this is the best job description I've ever seen because it outlines exactly what they need to do in that first year. And so that leader basically has that KPI. And so that's what I mean by getting clarity, because if you can't define success, how are you going to measure it? And how are you and your employee know if they're doing a good job?
And that's where the performance management system is so important. But I
Mhm.
love how you connected the roles and responsibilities of the job description into the performance KPIs because that alignment, I don't know how you can live without it. That's fantastic. So, doing a little bit deeper dive on what's really going on in the hiring market, we're hearing a lot of mixed messages. We're hearing that there's really low unemployment in some sectors and there's layoffs in others. So, it's not a level playing field all the way around, but I still hear, and we hear among our OneAccord clients, we're hearing all the time, they're all saying we can't find the right talent. So, what's going on in the hiring market that's creating that chasm?
Well, when I talked to you about, I mentioned this before, top talent always has options. Listen, I say in life, you should always quit a job, get fired, get laid off, because that's how you really understand and go through the evolution of sense of humility and growth. And so, yes, there is lower unemployment rates, but there's two areas that we need to look at. We need to look at the leaders, I don't want to say skill, the skill, the more technical trades, those trades and profession are starving. So if you look at plumbing, electrician, mechanical, carpentry, those are such valuable skill sets that for the most part are not going to be outsourced. Probably not in my lifetime will I see a robot walk through the store and lay down my carpet, but you need those people, and business owners that I know in those industries, they are starving for talent. We are seeing tech still getting hit, and tech and manufacturing slash supply chain really drive the economy. But, it's like I said, the tale of two cities, the tale of two types of employment. So I think that number with low unemployment is skewed. But again, going back to what I originally said, is top talent always has options. And top talent, again, hopefully will get fired once and get laid off, but they'll have options.
That sounds to me like a good sports analogy too. You have some of the best performers, whether it's at the collegiate or the professional level, that have lost their job. It's a very competitive, it's 100% merit based, and so yeah, those top performers, they have options. So I've heard you say before that titles and salaries aren't the whole story. So what do leaders get wrong usually when they think those are the main drivers in the hiring process? Seems a bit short-sighted to me.
Very short. So I think, when I talk to people that will say, what's the title? Or I'm not going to take that because of the title is not X, or, what's the comp? Those are very short-sighted, and you're not looking at the bigger picture. So those are, yes, important, but think about this, your compensation that you're looking at when you walk in the door, right? Okay, boom, you got the compensation, but then you've got your whole career, right? You've got your whole time there. So just because you got the dollar, does that mean you're going to be happy? Is it the right culture for you? I've had candidates, employees tell me, listen, they could have doubled my salary and I wouldn't have stayed because the culture is so toxic. So I think that if you're looking at that short-sighted kind of near term, that I would think about, are they the right person for the role? Because, if they get a call for $20,000 more, are they out the door?
Right, that's a good point. And that's not a good fit. And I totally agree that the end compensation isn't the be all and do all. I've actually accepted lower compensation
Mhm.
for companies that I thought A, had a better culture, but B, maybe better career pathing. And the most important thing is it's an environment that I can learn in order to kind
Mhm.
of advance, my level of play. So that makes a lot of good sense.
And
So if
titles
you,
and sorry, let me just finish this because you
yeah,
brought up a good point. So titles and salary can get attention, but do they keep people? One of my favorite stories that I tell, and I don't know this leader, but she was the CEO of Walgreens. And to get to the CEO level, she was missing the supply chain piece. So she took the job at Walmart at a lesser pay, at a lesser title, because she knew that she needed that piece to complete that full package together to the CEO level.
smart woman.
Absolutely. And I coach my clients as well. One of my former hiring managers who's hired me at 5 different companies, he was a CFO and he said, I want to get to be the CEO. And I said, okay, in my experience, the most effective CEOs come from some type of you know, marketing. The finance piece is really important, but they also have to have that people. And your CEO is the face, they're the cheerleader of the company, and they have their team to go out and execute the day to day. And so we talked a little bit, and I said, okay. And the best place to get this experience when you don't have it, ideally, is in your current company, right? Because they want to provide growth opportunities for you. So we talked about, okay, you need to go in and run a couple large accounts and run a team of salespeople. And he went, took that detour for 3 years, and he became a CEO of a publicly traded global company.
That's very
Again,
cool.
look at the big picture, not the short-term attention-grabbing stuff.
Another thing, another quality of a really good CEO is hiring smarter people around them. Now, for me, that was a pretty short putt. I mean, when I was the first time I was ever a
Because there are
CEO, I
very
was
few people that are smarter than you, Andrew?
What's that?
Because there are very few people that are smarter than you.
No, it's a short putt. In other words, it's really easy to find talent that's
Nope.
smarter than I am. No,
Stop.
I'm not a good putter. So, but it was my first shot at this, and I was very excited about it. But I also had some real skills gap. And the first job I had to do was to hire the second in charge, development director. You know, if you're not making money, you don't have a job, you have an expensive hobby, right? And we did a national search. It was a little bit larger company. And I brought some of the board members on, used the C suite. It wasn't just me. And it came down to two final candidates. And then we were all making decisions, et cetera. And I met with the board, and the board and I had the exact same opinion. We wanted candidate B. And then my C suite folks, all of the SVPs of the company who reported directly to me, they picked candidate A. And so I asked them, why did you go I didn't tell them who I was choosing.
Right.
I
But
said,
why? Yeah.
give me your rationale. And, they just kind of hemmed and hawed. Then one of them said, well, which candidate do you favor? And I said, not who you're talking about, candidate B. And they all just started laughing a little bit. And the alpha dog in the group, who was amazingly talented, said really sheepishly, we wanted to go with the other person because the person that you want's a lot smarter than you are. And I said, why the heck do you think I want to hire them? We need a good team. She's going to fill the gaps that I have. And so then we ended up hiring the smarter candidate. Anyway,
Right.
so I
Well, I
think,
think too is you always need to ask the why. Okay, so why do they want that candidate? And then why do you want? But we all say that we like to hire somebody smarter than us, but a truly confident, humble leader means that. I've
absolutely.
known too many CEOs that micromanage CFOs, CHROs, tech, the cybersecurity, the CISO. You have to have the confidence that your team, you have the best players in, because it's only going to make you look better. And there's nothing more complimentary than you hiring somebody that you've helped grow, either to be your successor or that maybe they leave to another company. It's not always fun it's not fun to have people leave that are excellent, but you can pat yourself on the back for being that leader. And right now, I am seeing such a gap in succession planning. A company that I'm working with, they have 4 key leaders. They have no one internal, because again, you always want to look internally, and if you've got the right tools in place, you're grooming. And all 4 of those leaders, guess what? They quit. And so they were in a really precarious situation where, they had to look internally. And so they either make move to say, we're going to put this one in because we got to fill this, or we go external and it's going to take some time and cost us some money because, regardless it does. So you should always be looking at what are the critical positions, who do you have in that role, and can they succeed? Because the employee too, when they're interviewing you, right, they want to know how they can grow through you as a leader and with the company.
Yeah. And if they're asking those kind of questions, I think that makes the candidate even more attractive. If they're really looking at, beyond, great, I go to work, I start Monday, but they're looking, a year or two beyond that. That's a really excellent quality. So
when I was internal, one of the things whenever I was interviewing for a job and I got an offer, before I accepted the offer, I said, what next? Where is this going to lead me? Does this make sense for me to take this opportunity, work on this skill set to help me long term? So I think that people, on where I was talking about candidates and employees when they're interviewing you, is I think that is also smart to keep in mind, is how is this helping the employee move the needle?
right. In fact, I've been in job interviews where the candidate, I mean, this is early on in the process before we've made all the cuts. I'm just at the end, what questions do you have for me? And when they have no questions, I'm thinking next.
Yeah.
That's
No.
that's a non-starter. So
It-
really good point. So if you could give business owners one piece of advice, I mean, just like no fluff, but just, how to improve their hiring right now, what would that be? What's the real nugget you want to share with business owners?
Don't wing it. Be prepared. So again, get clarity around that role, get clarity around what success looks like, get really clear on who you want your interview team to be. So who are your decision makers? who are nice to have and who are like the ancillary courtesy that we need to have them interview with. So you have to be prepared because, again, candidates are interviewing you as well. And there's nothing more insulting, especially when I hear from a candidate, like they didn't have my resume or they didn't have a chance to look at my resume before I got there. That's insulting because, as I like to say, we all have the same amount of one thing, and that's time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a perishable commodity. Well, that's
Mhm.
awesome. So when companies realize hiring just isn't about filling a seat, I always think of the Jim Collins axiom in chapter 3 of Good to Great. Put the right people in the right seats and get the wrong people off the bus. Kind of the
That's
shortened
very
version
true.
of that. But
Yep.
it's not only the right people, but it's putting them in the right positions where
And if
they can
and if they're
benefit.
not the right people, call it sooner. Don't be in that gray period because that can be really toxic on your team, on yourself, and the outcome and productivity. So usually within the first 90 days, you can tell.
And a lot of times, a lot of companies will put people on a 90-day probation, understanding that. I saw you roll your eyes. Is that not a
I
favorite
haven't
practice
seen
of
that.
yours?
No, I haven't seen that. Back, a couple decades ago, yes. I don't want to say probation, but I do think
That
it's
sounds
important.
punitive, doesn't it?
Right. I think hiring managers should have weekly check-ins with their new employees. Yes, they're going to be part of the team. And right now in this global world where you may not necessarily be in the same city as your team or your employee, you have to have those regular check-ins because at 90 days, you don't want to go in and say, Andrew, I really can't work for anymore. I'm not happy and done. Let's work together and hopefully being prepared, being clear, you'll have that right person hired. But there's always that, something happens. So have those regular check ins so that they're on track and you're on track.
And that they know you're there as the team member, that management is there to support you and make sure you're successful in your endeavor. So
Hmm.
we talked about it's more than filling a seat. So in terms of a long-term growth area, and you just used the word succession a moment ago, how do you and OneAccord help them think bigger than just a search?
That's a great question. And it's really why I partnered with OneAccord because we talked about at Frost Connections, we just don't put butts in seats, right? We build a success profile, we map out what 30, 90 days look like just to make sure that everyone is set up for the greatest amount of impact. But what I love about OneAccord, which Frost Connections can offer, is two things: is the interim. So we have a gap, and instead of trying to hire right
Or
away,
like a fractional executive?
exactly. So
Got it.
fractional, whatever. It doesn't have to
Interim.
be a C-suite. Have that person, if you need to fill that gap, make the investment to go in there. If it's 2 months, 3 months, sometimes it's a year. And then what happens is this person can help set up and run the function, maybe just keep it stabilized. But a lot of times throughout that journey, what my client thinks that they need, they don't need. Right. And so that I think is important. And then what we talk about with succession planning, right? So we want to look at the entire business. So the succession planning, the growth strategy, and maybe preparing companies for eventual sale, merger, or acquisition. So when you combine that with the ability to bring in top talent, it's a complete talent and growth solution. So instead of the one off hire, you get the long term plan, again, where you have the right leaders in the right seats. And it's backed by a strategy that makes your company survive and thrive, not just for today, but in the long term.
Well, and the connection between Frost Connections and OneAccord, I just think is really strategically smart because you're filling a hole in our bench, right? It's like our bench is helping you in a certain areas, like on the interim basis you were talking about, but that was an area that was a huge gap for us. So that's a
Yes.
great connection.
Yes.
So in wrapping things up here, is there anything you else that you would like to share?
Hang on, Andrew. Hang on 1 second. I'm sorry. We'll have to pause this. Hold on, Lee.
Okay, no problem. Okay, editor, obviously you are cutting this out.
Sorry, Andrew. My dog escaped.
No worries, no worries.
Sorry. So thank God we have editing. Okay.
We
I'm back.
do.
Sorry about that.
No
So
worries. I just gave the editor some instructions and now I'm remembering we're both dog families. So before we conclude here, Kim, is there any other advice or anything else you'd like to share with our small and mid-sized business leader audience that you think would be helpful?
Yes, and I was going to bring that up as an example. So a lot of times I am working with, smaller organizations. And when I say smaller, they could be anywhere from 2 million to 500 million. The leader, the CEO, the owner doesn't know what they need. And they'll come to me and say, Kim, I need to hire a GM. Okay, why are you looking? And through that, I'll say, if you're looking to sell the company or it's not for the right reasons or it's not the right person, this is where I can bring in OneAccord because I'm not going to try to convince, I'm not going to just sell my services to sell my services if it's not the right fit. And so really being, again, crystal clear about what you need and transparent because I've also had clients that have said, Kim, I need to hire this person because my company's failing. That's not the time or the reason to bring in a permanent full-time hire. This is where you need to look at some fractional work, some interim work, some strategic work versus putting all that pressure on hiring that one person and that one person's going to solve everything.
Yeah. And you said something that reminded me. Well, you said it in your own words, but that is the problem isn't always the problem. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in and done, kind of a discovery, and the client wants to deal with a surface or a symptomatic issue. And it's like
Yes.
putting a band aid on a
Yep.
compound fracture.
Right.
It's not going to do any good. Well, this has been awesome. You are great. I'm so excited and I can't wait to have the opportunity to collaborate with you. So before we go, there are some in our audience that might have a question or want to connect with you. What's the best way our audience can connect with you or your
Reach out.
dog?
Yeah, sorry. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a direct message, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation. And it doesn't have to be just around, hiring. If you want to talk to me about trends or best practices, I love helping people and companies succeed.
Awesome. So that again is Kim Frost at Frost Connections. Put them both in the search bar and you will go right to her. Thank
And
you
LinkedIn.
so much,
Yep.
Kim. I so appreciate your time. And that concludes our episode. I want to thank you all again for joining the Value Factory and just wish you a great week. Goodbye, everybody.